Having a good time with these new Sherlock Holmes mysteries? If you want to help the channel thrive, hop over to our Patreon. You will get to hear our stories way before the rest of YouTube does. Every bit of financial support helps us keep making these videos for you. The link to our Patreon is in the description below. It was a bleak evening in the middle of March, with a tenacious fog clinging to the cobbled lanes of Baker Street, seeping even into our comfortable sitting room at 221B. My companion, Mr. Sherlock Holmes, was sprawled in his armchair, a volume of monographs on the polyphonic motets of Lassus balanced precariously upon his knee. His eyes, keen and restless, stared into the swirling grey outside rather than at the musical notation. The air was thick with the aroma of his shag tobacco, and the occasional melancholy sigh escaping him spoke volumes of his current mental state. "Another day, Watson," he drawled without shifting his gaze. "Another day wherein the mundane triumphs over the magnificent. I cannot find a single crime worth the contemplation of a sane man. Burglaries of pawnshops, squabbles over legacies, the usual sordid tale of human perfidy, all remain entirely beneath the notice of the analytical mind." I lowered my newspaper, which contained nothing more exciting than a detailed account of a particularly brutal fog-related cab accident. "Surely, Holmes, the peace is a blessing. Scotland Yard, I hear, is rather pleased with the current lull in serious crime." "Lull, Watson?" he snorted, finally turning his piercing gaze upon me. "A lull for the common constable, perhaps, whose imagination scarcely extends beyond the truncheon and the cells. For those of us who perceive the subtle eddies beneath the placid surface, a lull can often portend a tempest. The very absence of unusual mischief suggests a cunning hand at work, one capable of cloaking its operations with an unprecedented degree of circumspection." Scarcely had these words left his lips when the sound of a hansom cab drawing up sharply outside reached our ears, followed by a hurried knocking upon our door. Our landlady, Mrs. Hudson, soon ushered in a familiar figure. Inspector Gregson of Scotland Yard stood before us, his usually florid face now a shade paler, his brow furrowed with an unfamiliar anxiety. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," Gregson began, removing his bowler and running a harried hand through his thinning hair. "I trust I am disturbing no well-earned repose. The Yard, the entire city, I dare say, is in a complete quandary. We need your unique insights, Mr. Holmes, as this matter defies all conventional explanation." Holmes, ever the theatrical, slowly removed his pipe from his lips, his eyes gleaming with renewed interest. Gregson, I had a presentiment of your arrival. Lay bare your tale, my dear fellow, and let us see if the mists of London have indeed birthed something worthy of scrutiny." Gregson, with a nervous glance at me, produced a small, exquisitely crafted jeweller's velvet bag from his coat pocket. He placed it carefully on the table. "It began 3 months ago, Mr. Holmes, with the theft of the Duke of Marlborough's sapphire pendant. It was a daring, almost insolent act. The Duke's country estate is heavily guarded, every window barred, every door locked from within. Yet the sapphire, a priceless family heirloom, vanished from his private study, a room the Duke himself secured each night." "And the method?" Holmes inquired, leaning forward, all ennui entirely vanished. "That's the devil of it, Mr. Holmes. We found no evidence of forced entry and absolutely no sign of a struggle. The Duke's servants swore they heard nothing. It was as if the jewel simply dematerialized. Then, a week later, Lady Ashworth's pearl necklace disappeared from her townhouse in Belgravia. Again, we discovered no apparent breach and located 0 witnesses. This time, however, the culprit left behind a peculiar calling card. Gregson carefully upturned the velvet bag, and onto the mahogany surface slid a single playing card. It was the Jack of Diamonds. Holmes picked it up, turning it over between his long, sensitive fingers. "The Jack of Diamonds," he murmured, a glint entering his eyes. "An interesting choice." He bypassed the king and the ace, selecting the knave, the trickster. Go on, Gregson. Since then, Mr. Holmes, there have been 5 additional incidents of a similar nature. Each time a piece of high-value jewelry is snatched from under the noses of their owners. The locations are always highly secure premises. The thief always vanishes without a trace, and he invariably leaves one of these infernal Jack of Diamonds cards behind. Only last night, the Countess of Wessex was relieved of her diamond tiara during a small supper party at her residence. She was in the drawing room with her guests. The tiara was in her boudoir, locked securely in a safe. Yet, by the time she retired, it was gone, and another one of these lay upon her pillow. He indicated the card with a frustrated gesture. "And you have no leads? No suspects? No glimmer of an individual, however shadowy?" Holmes pressed, his eyes now narrowed in deep concentration. Gregson shook his head ruefully. "Absolutely nothing, Mr. Holmes. It is as if a ghost is at work." We interrogated the servants, scrutinized the security systems, and examined the usual rogues gallery, all to no avail. The common consensus at the yard points to a master of disguise, perhaps a cat burglar of unparalleled skill. However, the sheer audacity and effortless infiltration beg a belief. Some of my men are even whispering of the supernatural, though I confess I put little stock in such nonsense. "Supernatural, Gregson," Holmes said with a faint smile, "is merely a term for that which has yet to be explained by natural law. This Jack of Diamonds, as he has styled himself, is evidently a man of extraordinary talents. Moving undetected through the most secure residence of London's elite and leaving no trace beyond a playing card suggests a mind of considerable acumen, elevating him far beyond the common cut-purse. This, Watson," he added, turning to me with a sudden animation that dispelled the last vestiges of his earlier boredom, "is precisely the sort of problem our grey cells were fashioned to unravel." Over the next few weeks, the Jack of Diamonds became the sole focus of Sherlock Holmes's formidable intellect. The walls of our sitting room soon bristled with maps of London, marked with red circles indicating the locations of the thefts, lines connecting them, and annotations in Holmes's precise hand. Newspaper clippings, descriptions of the stolen articles, and every scrap of information Gregson or Lestrade could furnish were meticulously arranged and scrutinized. Holmes and I visited several of the crime scenes. At the Duke of Marlborough's country estate, Holmes spent hours examining the ground outside the study window, the very fabric of the curtains and the internal mechanism of the lock. He emerged with a thoughtful expression. "We have no ladder marks, Watson, and absolutely 0 discernible footprints. The window, though locked from within, shows a faint, almost imperceptible scratch at the very top of the frame. The Duke's study is on the 1st floor. This suggests a man of exceptional agility, or perhaps one utilizing some form of grappling device that leaves virtually zero trace. At Lady Ashworth's townhouse, Holmes focused intently on the ventilation shafts and the servants' entrance. The staff usually represent the weak link, Watson. In this case, however, a new factor emerges. Lady Ashworth is known for her extreme discretion and fastidious nature. Her staff have been with her for years, loyal to a fault. Yet the pearls vanished from her personal dresser drawer, which was also locked. He pointed to a small smudge, almost invisible, on the polished mahogany near the drawer. Observe this faint residue. It appears to be something metallic, perhaps a fine dust. It is foreign to the drawer itself, indicating something carried inside. Each theft, upon Holmes's examination, revealed a common thread. An almost arrogant confidence, meticulous planning, accounting for every contingency, and an uncanny ability to exploit the most minuscule oversight in security or human habit. The thief completely avoided violence, left behind not a single fingerprint for tracing, and possessed an almost supernatural ability to bypass locks and evade surveillance. He avoids breaking in entirely, Watson, Holmes explained one evening, standing before his analytical table, magnifying glass in hand, examining a photograph of the latest crime scene. He melds perfectly with the environment. Instead of forcing entry, he ensures he is already present, or more precisely, he is perceived to be present in an entirely different capacity. A master of disguise, then, I offered, recalling Gregson's earlier suggestion. A master of identity, Watson. Disguise serves as merely one tool among many. This man goes far beyond donning a wig and spectacles. He assumes a fully realized persona, complete with bearing, accent, and mannerisms. He possesses the capability to pass himself off as a footman, a tradesman, a delivery boy, or even a guest, should the need arise. His choice of victim suggests an intimate knowledge of wealthy social circles, or at least a diligent study of their habits and vulnerabilities. Holmes paced the room, his long, gaunt figure a silhouette against the gaslight. Consider the Jack of Diamonds card. It functions as a carefully chosen psychological weapon alongside acting as a signature. It signifies the knave, the trickster, the rogue. It suggests a certain playful arrogance, a disdain for authority, and perhaps even a subtle hint regarding his own background. A man who might have once moved in refined circles while now operating completely outside the law. You speak as if you know the man, Holmes. In a sense, Watson, I am beginning to. I am building a mental framework, a psychological blueprint of the individual. His intellect is prodigious, his nerve boundless. He has zero compunctions about breaking the law, yet he actively shies away from physical confrontation. He is highly methodical, alongside being deeply audacious. There are perhaps 4 truly great criminal minds in London capable of sustained intellectual endeavour in pursuit of illicit gain. Moriarty, of course, is one. This Jack of Diamonds is quickly proving himself worthy of a place amongst them. Indeed, I would venture to say he is the 4th smartest man in London, following Moriarty myself, and perhaps one other whose work has yet to fully manifest. Our close calls with the elusive Jack grew more frequent. One night, a theft occurred at a fashionable residence in Mayfair. Holmes, having deduced the likely target and timing, arranged with Gregson to have the house discreetly watched. We arrived moments after the alarm was raised, finding a panic-stricken butler, a missing ruby brooch, and a fresh Jack of Diamonds card lying innocently on a small occasional table. Holmes examined the scene, a grim satisfaction playing upon his lips. He departed through the kitchen, Watson. The back door was completely unlocked and showed zero signs of force. The kitchen staff, tired from an evening of service, swore that the pantry boy, a new hire, had just left. They described a slender youth, remaining rather quiet throughout the evening. However, the pantry boy they officially hired possessed a slight limp. This impostor, I gather, did not. He pointed to a faint smear of oil on the doorknob just below the lock. During my earlier reconnaissance, I noted the new pantry boy's hands were rough from manual labor. This oil, however, is of a much finer quality, likely originating from a delicate mechanism. Our man wore gloves, yet perhaps briefly adjusted a small device, leaving this infinitesimal residue. He is a professional, Watson, and one possessing a penchant for meticulous detail. We missed him by mere minutes, perhaps even seconds. The chase continued, consuming Holmes entirely. He neglected his violin, abandoned his chemical experiments, and smoked his pipe almost incessantly. The Yard, increasingly desperate, offered a substantial reward. Nevertheless, the Jack of Diamonds remained a phantom, a whisper on the wind, leaving zero clues beyond his signature card. The ultimate challenge, Holmes deduced, would undoubtedly occur during a truly grand public occasion. He thrives on chaos, Watson, drawing energy from the distractions of the multitude. He needs to blend flawlessly, becoming part of the tapestry of society, only to unravel a thread entirely at his own choosing. His prediction proved remarkably prescient. Word reached us of an upcoming royal gala at Buckingham Palace, a magnificent assembly of royalty, aristocracy, and foreign dignitaries. The jewels on display, worn by the ladies of the court, would be incomparable. The security naturally would be entirely unprecedented. "This is it, Watson," Holmes declared, tapping a finger forcefully on the newspaper announcement. "The stage is set for his grandest performance. He simply cannot resist the challenge. The sheer audacity of such an act will appeal deeply to his particular brand of criminal pride." Through his connections at Scotland Yard, Holmes managed to secure invitations for us to the gala, presenting ourselves as observers compiling a novel security report. I confess I felt a sharp prickle of unease. Stalking such a dangerous and cunning individual amidst the highest echelons of society seemed a foolhardy, extremely perilous undertaking. The night of the gala was a spectacle of unparalleled magnificence. The palace glittered under thousands of gaslights, its grand halls thronged with an assembly of figures in splendid attire. The air hummed with hushed conversation, the rustle of silks, and the faint strains of a string orchestra. Dukes and duchesses, ambassadors and ministers all mingled under the watchful eyes of plain-clothed detectives and uniformed guards. Holmes, dressed in immaculate evening wear, seemed an almost incongruous figure amidst the gaiety. His eyes bypassed the dazzling jewels and famous faces, sweeping instead across the array of liveried servants, the footmen, the maids, and the countless waiters circulating with trays of champagne and canapés. "Observe, Watson," he murmured, his voice exceptionally low. "It is remarkably easy to disappear into the background when one is fully expected to be there. The truly clever criminal actively becomes part of the scenery, establishing himself as an expected and overlooked component. We moved slowly through the crowded ballroom, Holmes's gaze missing absolutely nothing. He paused frequently, his head cocked slightly, as if listening to a frequency beyond mortal hearing. I, too, tried to emulate his vigilance. Unfortunately, the sheer press of humanity and the dazzling array of sensory input overwhelmed my faculties. Everyone seemed to move with a practiced grace, every face presenting a mask of polite indifference. Suddenly, Holmes stiffened. His eyes locked onto a particular waiter, a slender young man with an unblemished complexion and neatly combed dark hair, currently offering a tray of refreshments to a group of elderly ladies. There was nothing outwardly remarkable about him. Yet Holmes's posture underwent a subtle but profound change, a predatory alertness flooding his frame. "Notice the immaculate uniform, Watson," he whispered, so softly I barely heard him over the orchestral swell. "Freshly pressed naturally. Observe the cuffs, however. See how they run slightly too long for his hands? It is a minor detail, perhaps, yet highly telltale. Furthermore, watch the way he balances the tray, too perfectly, almost clinically so. A genuine waiter, after hours of service, would show a subtle fatigue, a slight easing of the shoulders. This individual moves with an almost unnatural precision. As the waiter turned, moving towards a secluded alcove where a display case held a magnificent diamond necklace belonging to a foreign dignitary, Holmes pressed a firm hand against my arm. "Observe the flicker in his eyes, Watson, as he scans the room. It is the gaze of a predator, constantly evaluating and calculating, entirely unlike a man simply serving drinks." The waiter slipped into the alcove, momentarily obscured by a towering potted palm. Holmes wasted no time. With a speed belying his earlier languor, he pushed through the crowd, his apologies to startled guests barely audible. I followed as best I could, my heart pounding fiercely in my chest. We reached the alcove precisely as the waiter, his back towards us, made a swift, almost imperceptible movement towards the display case. A glint of metal flashed in his hand, a small, delicate tool. "Stop right there, Clay!" Holmes's voice, though sharp, remained carefully modulated to avoid causing a wider scene. The waiter froze. For a fraction of a second, his shoulders tensed. Then, with a sudden fluid motion, he spun around. His eyes, devoid of their earlier pleasant deference, burned with a cold, intelligent defiance. It was a face I had seen before in police sketches, though never possessing such chilling vivacity. The smooth features, the cunning intellect radiating clearly from his gaze. It was indeed John Clay. He made absolutely no attempt at denial. A faint, almost imperceptible smirk touched his lips. "Mr. Holmes," he said, his voice surprisingly cultured, lacking the expected cockney lilt of a common thief. "I confess, your reputation precedes you. I considered it virtually impossible to be detected amongst such a throng." "Your skill is undeniable, Clay," Holmes acknowledged, advancing highly cautiously. "Your arrogance ultimately serves as your undoing. The subtle details, the ones a common thief entirely ignores, invariably betray you." Before Holmes could close the distance, Clay, with a sudden burst of agility, flung his tray of champagne glasses directly at us. The delicate crystal shattered against the marble floor with a startling crash, drawing immediate gasps and cries from nearby guests. In the ensuing momentary chaos, as security guards began to converge, Clay executed a swift, mocking salute. "Another time, Mr. Holmes," he called out, his voice ringing clear above the sudden din. "A pity our dance must end so abruptly." With an astonishing burst of speed, he darted away, melting seamlessly into the shocked crowd. Holmes, ever quick, leaped over the shards of glass, hot on his heels. I followed, struggling to keep pace, navigating through the bewildered revelers, turning to locate the source of the commotion. Clay, a master of movement, weaved gracefully through the labyrinthine corridors of the palace, remaining perpetually a step ahead. He ducked into a service entrance, leading us through a maze of kitchens and sculleries, where startled cooks and dishwashers gaped openly at the sight of a tuxedo-clad gentleman in hot pursuit of a fleeing waiter. The chase spilled out into the frosty March night, plunging into the palace gardens. The fog, ever present, now served as Clay's steadfast ally, swallowing him whole. Holmes, his breath coming in ragged gasps, halted at the edge of a dense rhododendron bush, peering vainly into the impenetrable grey. "Confound it, Watson!" he exclaimed, striking the bush fiercely with his fist. "The devilish fog! He has vanished like a wraith." I, equally breathless, caught up to him. "He is gone, Holmes! Lost entirely to the night!" Holmes stood silently for a moment, his chest heaving, his eyes scanning the swirling mist. Then a slow smile of profound satisfaction began to spread across his face. He bent down, retrieving something from the damp grass at the foot of the rhododendron. It was a Jack of Diamonds playing card, crisp and pristine, lying atop the dewy blades. "He still left his signature, Watson," Holmes said, holding up the card triumphantly. "It acts as a defiant gesture, a taunt, perhaps even a challenge. It also serves as a firm confirmation. I now possess his measure. He is audacious, utterly fearless, and possessed of a truly remarkable intellect. He could have slipped away completely unnoticed. However, he actively chose to announce his departure. Back in our sitting room, the gaslight seemed to push back the encroaching fog. Nevertheless, the image of John Clay's defiant face and cunning eyes remained highly vivid in my mind. Holmes, after a lengthy silent vigil with his pipe, finally began to speak, piecing together the fragments of his deduction. "He bears no resemblance whatsoever to an ordinary thief, Watson. That much is perfectly clear. He is a man of education, of refinement, perhaps even possessing a noble, albeit impoverished, lineage. His speech, his bearing, and his audacious theatricality all point to a man who, barring a twist of fate or a moral failing, might have graced the very halls he now burgles. He deeply understands the psychology of the elite, their routines, and their vulnerabilities. He knows the easiest way into a secure house relies on deception rather than force. His methods, Watson, reveal a mind craving intellectual stimulation equally as much as financial gain. The little turns, as he terms these jewel thefts, extend far beyond simple acts of larceny. They are a series of elaborate puzzles, a game played with Scotland Yard and, as he now knows, with myself. The Jack of Diamonds serves as far more than a signature. It acts as a formal declaration of intent, a badge of his self-proclaimed genius. "What happens now, Holmes?" I asked. "Will he continue these daring thefts?" Holmes stared deeply into the glowing embers of the fire, a thoughtful frown settling upon his brow. He has reached the pinnacle of his current game, Watson. Continuing these little turns would force him to repeat himself, making him predictable. A mind such as his, so restless and ambitious, will inevitably seek new challenges and new heights of audacity. These jewel thefts, while brilliant, serve merely as an apprenticeship, a testing ground for his skills of disguise, his cunning, and his sheer nerve. He has now made an enemy of Sherlock Holmes, I mused, and indeed of all London's law enforcement. He cannot remain safely in the shadows forever. Precisely, Watson. He is entirely too clever to merely disappear. His future endeavours, I confidently predict, will occur on an even grander scale. They will be far more intricate, involving complex schemes, forgeries, and perhaps even more desperate measures reaching far beyond mere objects of value. A man combining such intellect with such a severe moral vacuum represents a terrible force to be reckoned with. He will undoubtedly leave his mark on London, and it will be a deep one. Holmes leaned back in his chair, a faint smile playing upon his lips. The Jack of Diamonds has provided me with a highly worthy challenge, Watson. He has proven himself an antagonist of the very first rank. This cat-and-mouse game has merely just begun. I suspect, with a thrill making my very blood sing, that our paths are destined to cross again. Mine and that of John Clay, the fourth smartest man in London, will undoubtedly intersect under circumstances far more perilous than a mere chase through a palace garden. As the fog outside thickened, and the gaslights of Baker Street cast long dancing shadows upon the walls, I knew with chilling certainty that Holmes's prediction would come to pass. The little turns of John Clay served merely as the prelude to a much darker, much more dangerous symphony of crime, one that would inevitably draw my extraordinary friend back into its perilous embrace. Thanks for joining me for another original mystery. Do not forget to check out our Patreon down below to support the channel.